I'd like to call to order the July 3rd meeting of the Natural Resources Board. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. At this point, we'll move to the roll call. Ms. Graham.
Ms. Mosblick?
Here.
Ms. Glazier?
Here.
Mr. Stadelman?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Here.
Thank you.
Motion to approve minutes of last meeting.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We'll move to the next bullet point. We have under announcements, open positions continuing on the Natural Resources Board. Mrs. Hagler.
We have 2 alternate positions available.
All right, thank you. At this point, we're at number 6, so we have public input. If there's anyone from the audience who would like to contribute remarks, I would like to ask if anyone would like to come up, if they can please state your first and last name, and please spell their last name for the recording. Okay, I'm going to assume there's no public input at this point. So we'll go to new business, number 7. We have a new item here. We have wildlife crossing signs.
All right. Well, we've had a number of citizen requests about concerning wildlife and endangerment in certain areas, especially where conservation lands are at busy roads. And there are a number of signs around the city here and there, some for certain specific species. So we have like a tortoise signs and sandhill crane signs. And what we needed was something that really covered everything, was bigger, bolder, and easier to see. And so what we've come up with at the sign shop is when it's a wildlife crossing. This is a silhouette of the tortoise, the sandhill crane. This way?
No, perfect.
There we go.
Perfect.
So this is caution wildlife crossing. It's twice the size of those tortoise signs, and a lot of people have said that it's hard to tell it's even a tortoise unless you know what you're looking at. And I think this will really help get the point across better. And so the major intersections we're looking at already are, of course, over by the Stormwater Park and at Pelican Island, where the conservation area is, and hopefully reduce some of our roadside casualties of our protected species. So we're just really excited about that.
Oh,
That's great.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to old business at this point. Item A, we have the community oyster gardens. It looks like we're looking for an update here.
All right, we like to announce we hired an intern, Zachary Graff. He comes from FAU. He's a biology major with experience in aquaculture, amazing knowledge of the Intercoastal Waterway, and he brings a lot of energy and excitement. So we're going to get this education project out, and we're going to start getting the cages attached to the docks, and we have our first tour booked for July 13th. And also he went out to the site where we had our original reef installation a couple years ago, the Eagle Scout project, and he'd like to present a short analysis of the site.
Absolutely, sounds great. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Welcome.
My name is Zachary Graff, and as stated, I am an intern for the Sebastian Oyster Project. We did a brief survey of the Eagle Scout project by Troop 500 in 2016. The location for this original project was Riverview Park, about a half-mile away from here, and the oysters were originally installed on April 23rd, with help from all of the members of Troop 500. These bags were stacked approximately 50 feet from the shoreline, and 2 rows of 14 for a total of 56 oyster bags. Each bag contained approximately 40 to 50 pounds of oyster shells. They were placed on a location in jute mesh material, and the jute mesh is meant to decompose over a period of months, allowing the oyster shells to fall out over the area. And the concept is the naturally occurring larvae oysters in the water column will settle onto these oyster shells, and over a period of months and years, it will create a new live oyster bar. Upon our initial inspection, we didn't find any large oyster mass anywhere. I didn't see any live oysters. There's a few reasons why this could have happened. It was a popular kayak and small boat launch, so it got a lot of foot traffic, and it was next to a very popular boat usage area across an open waterway, so it got a lot of wind and a lot of wake chop that stirred up the soft sediment the oysters were resting on and dispersed and covered many of them. But the good news is these smaller oyster fragments that had been processed by this same tide and mechanical stress actually built up the soft sediment and created a lush grass bed. The area where the oysters were supposed to be was covered completely by shoal grass. It's a pioneering species of seagrass, and what's meant by pioneering is that it is usually first to show up in an area that has been damaged through natural causes or man-made causes. It can survive in hotter temperatures, shallower water, harder, softer substrate, and poorer water conditions. This is actually a photo taken on the exact spot where the oysters are supposed to be. You can see over to the left side of the screen, we have a little bit of remnants of oyster fragments. They're mixed in with the grass, but right now we've got a pretty thick coverage of shoal grass and Gracilaria algae, which is a naturally occurring green algae in the Indian River. This area wasn't an oyster bar, but it was still very lively. There's a lot going on there. We encountered several species, and with just our hands in a 5-minute period, we were able to capture a half dozen different things. We've got some tulip snails, a frillfin goby, which is a small predator of copepods and grass flats and oyster beds, several species of mud crabs, several different lifespans of Atlantic blue and stone crabs. We also encountered spider crabs, hermit crabs, different species of shrimp, numerous species of shrimp. I personally saw juvenile redfish, pufferfish, southern stingrays, and a very high abundance of small forage fish, different sizes of mullets, menhaden, croakers, killifish, pinfish. So it was a very active area. In conclusion, it was a good plan. They got a good material. The jute bag was a good idea, but it was in an unprotected area and a soft substrate, and all the mechanical stress seemed to cover it up. Even though there wasn't any oyster apparent in this area, it was still very lively. There was a lot going on here. A lot of small fish were living in this seagrass nursery that appeared where the oysters were supposed to be. I believe that if the same plan was implemented somewhere that was a little bit more sheltered and with a harder substrate, it would show a lot more success. Any questions?
Do we have plans to continue this project or launch a new project at all?
I think this project was kind of complete in and of itself. I think the new project going forward was the one at the working waterfront that we had to.
Are you involved in that one as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I got a question. It looked like it turned into kind of like an artificial reef situation with the placement of an artificial structure in a marine habitat, and it attracted marine life. Would you think it'd be feasible to help replace some of the seagrass that's been lost with maybe a program like this, placing things like this in the water to help replace seagrass and that type of marine life? Because even though you need to get oysters, it still would attract fish and everything else.
I'll come out and say that's a little bit above my level. To replace the seagrass, we are not even sure why the seagrass is gone. The PhDs and marine biologists that have been studying it for years all have different theories, from pollution to viruses to natural cycles of the environment. So
because it looked like the seagrass grew pretty good on the on those bags.
It does.
It's just something, an alternate.
Absolutely.
finding.
I have noticed firsthand as a user of the Indian River, it does occur a little bit more in the past few years than it has in the past, but that doesn't mean that there will be another die-off, so I'm not exactly sure if stabilizing the substrate would be a fix to bring back all the seagrass.
Is the, excuse me, is the shoal grass, would you expect other species of seagrass to come into that area? Or?
Generally, in other areas of the world, the shoal grass appears all over the Caribbean and into South America, but generally in an area that has a natural disaster or even man-made disasters, as the water quality improves, as the substrate and the nutrition improves, the shoal grass is the first to come in, and then it's replaced by manatee grass and turtle grass, which are the two other common species, former common species in the Indian River, but they do require much cleaner water, much less mechanical stress, and a lot more nutrients. So it is a big step between shoal grass and turtle grass, but this is, generally speaking, a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. If I look at the agenda, it looks like we skipped over 8A2, the request for board member to act as a volunteer coordinator. I'm not sure if we want to try and do that now.
I'm sort of hoping that we'll wait till we have a fuller staff. I thought maybe Gil would probably be interested.
Gotcha. He's been involved in previous projects.
Right.
Okay. 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 So we'll go to item C. We've got the landscaping ordinance review. We have two guest speakers. We've got Ms. Nikki Monroe and Dr. Richard Baker.
Excuse me, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
if I may do a brief introduction as to what we're looking for. I believe the last meeting you were handed out our existing landscape ordinance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you had also received some examples from other cities or municipalities, correct? And so what we are hoping to obtain from this board, after listening to some of the presentations you received this evening, is just a bulleted list, if you will, of items, and I know Rose has already sent us something that was really good, that, you know, just letting us know what issues you feel need to be addressed, what items you really think should be strengthened. We're not asking this board, certainly, to rewrite our landscape code. That is not your role nor your expertise. However, we value your input, and that is why I'm so glad that Kim and this board has requested the presence and the presentations that you're receiving this evening. However, please be very much aware that we have put in the budget this year, and hopefully it gets passed, for our consultants, our landscape architecture planning consultants, to look at several revisions, updating several revisions of our land development code, and one being the landscape code, because we know that it needs to be tightened up, and we also need a little relief from some of the other past regulations. So with that in mind, I look forward to receiving your recommendations, if you will, and your thoughts on what you hear and what you read, so that then we can incorporate that into, you know, our moving forward with our consultant and updating the landscape code. Does that make any sense? And I didn't know if you had any questions regarding that.
So do you want us to come up with that list here at the meeting, or from our experiences and what we see here, you want us to kind of compile that list personally and then send that to you?
Whatever is most convenient for you. I mean, there are those who like to discuss it right there and maybe just verbalize a list to Kim, and she can write things down really quickly. Or if you'd prefer to mull it over and think about it and send Kim an email later on, that's acceptable too. And there's no real time frame with that. we're going to take all of this information, certainly, and take it into consideration when we revise the landscape code. But for any type of initiatives or anything like that, I know I see later on that there's another initiative, and if I may, I'm just going to just make kind of a blanket statement that like the Sustainable Business Initiative, if this board, strongly feels that they want to recommend an initiative or that the city staff takes a look-see at something that's in place already, such as the landscape ordinance, we the staff would strongly recommend and appreciate a kind of a letter from you all, which, Kim can draft, but a letter stating that, what you're looking for and what you'd like, because then we can pass it up to the city council on your behalf. Do you understand what I'm saying? So then the city council really knows what this board would like to see in certain initiatives, and then we can move them forward. And that's something that I wanted to bring forward and make sure that this board understood the process so that we can keep things moving in the direction that you would like to see them moved in. Okay? Okay, I just wanted to be here to say that to you. Thank you very much. You all are doing really, really great. I know I haven't been here in a few months, and I really appreciate Kim's leadership with you all, and you all have just taken on so many good things, and I'm very excited. This is going to be great, a good year. Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's anything further, if there's Nikki Monroe. Is she out there? No. No. I just contacted her we had been back and forth by email. Yep. Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll have Dr. Baker, do you mind going? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it very much. Would I be able to sit here, stand here? Be all right? You can hear me all right? Good. So I'm Richard Baker. I'm president of the Pelican Island Audubon Society, and I actually worked for IFAS a bit, and was director of the Florida Medical Entomology Lab for 16 years, and now I serve on the Indian River County's Health Board, and quite concerned about our environment. What we're proposing to you as Audubon is that we need to get some new landscape ordinances in Indian River County and in their cities. And so we're here to Sebastian, the first one. We think it could change the landscapes ordinances in our other cities that we have in the county and in our county. This is a couple of maps here. You can all see these on your screen, I guess. One was taken in 1970 of Sebastian. I think this is when general development had just sort of outlaid their development for the city of Sebastian. So you can see Sebastian really grew there from the 70s on. It looks like the drawings here where the road's laid out, but you don't see very many houses there yet. But then over on the right is what I Googled down, which I think is this year's view. And you can see that instead of having some nice native plants there, we have now yards and houses. And I don't think we need to keep putting this up. There are solutions to the problem, I think. American lawns cover about 63,008 square miles of grass, sod, and this is data from NASA. It's the largest irrigated crop in the United States, 3 times more than corn. No one eats it. The primary purpose, I guess, is to make us feel good. Requires more water than just rainfall, 9 billion gallons a day, 200 gallons a day per person. We need to stop this for our survival. We don't have that much water. probably be cheaper if we paid people not to have a lawn. The staggering wastefulness of this American lawn is 2 billion gallons of gas for our lawn equipment, 42 billion pounds of CO2 emitted from blowers and mowers, 13 billion pounds of toxic carcinogenic air pollutants, and 100 million pounds of pernicious lawn chemicals and fertilizers. What bothers me is it wakes me up in the morning. We are losing our native plants here. And not only that, we're getting about 3,300 exotic plants coming in that really do no good for nature. Some people say, well, we got our national parks. Our national parks only take up about 3.4% of our nation, and 2.2% of this is in Alaska. We got started getting involved in this in about 2016 when Edie Witter and the ORCA group, the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, published in the Press Journal this map showing the moorings. On the right-hand side, you got that anchor development there. It looks like the anchor. And you can see the red around it on the lower right-hand corner of it. That's the high nitrogen. If you look over on the right one is the high phosphorus. And if you look over to the left at the Oslo Riverfront Conservation Area, you say it's pretty blue, means it's got low amounts of these two chemicals. The citizens there were quite concerned, and they called Audubon and said, we're embarrassed. We want to do something about that. And so actually they have 18 HOAs in the moorings. And the presidents got together and they invited me to come talk to them. And they said, we want to do something about that. We don't want this to happen. The interesting thing about the moorings is that they are on sewer. There's no septic tanks there, except for only one, and that was the original developer. But so most of that phosphorus and nitrogen is coming from fertilizer off their lawns. You can see a picture on the left of why they probably have a problem there in the moorings. But I said to Edie the other day, I said, what about the county in the northern part? And so she sent me this graph. And in the light yellow, you see the amount of nitrogen, total phosphorus, and glyphosate. This is in the muck, found in the south part. But look at the north, which is the orange thing. We have a lot more of these three chemicals in the northern part of the county than we do in the southern part of the county. The southern county is sort of blessed with the Fort Pierce Inlet. The Sebastian Inlet is not near as big, does not have as much water coming through, and doesn't clean things out as much as the Fort Pierce one does. So we had a meeting in January. We had a conference, Transforming Landscapes for a Sustainable Future. And out of that, the moorings had an association meeting, and they invited me to speak. And they are starting to do something. They want to be the example in our community of changing things around. Our conference was pretty successful, and we are having another one in February 2nd. We have some great speakers coming in, and we're going to have another one, hopefully, to educate people on how to get native plants going. I took some pictures in some Sebastian Landscapes here. Some of these are near where I live, and you can see there are really lots of nice lawns. They have a lot of good people coming in to cut their grass, fertilize. Some of them on the lower left, you notice, have some palm trees left. And the one on the lower right shows where some have left the trees around their neighborhood, and so they got some oak trees. But a lot of houses don't. This is more in San Sebastian Springs, where they have left the saw palmetto. They have left some of the trees. But look at the pond down there, full of algae. Probably coming from the nitrogen and stuff coming off the road. I went to Collier Creek, which I really like. It's one of the nice subdivisions in Sebastian. And if you go through the right-hand corner, you go in the gate and turn to the right, you'll see the older part there, and they have a lot of nice oak trees. It's a kind of a nice area. It's one of the older. It's been probably around for 20 years or so. And I've took some pictures in the lower part there of some of the houses, which are really quite nice. But then I went over to the recent development. This is 2016. These are a couple of years old. And this is looking, the first one on the left is looking east. You don't see an oak tree there planted. There's one oak tree. I was told by one person, and if you look at the other slide to the right, is looking in the opposite direction, looking west. I only saw one oak tree there. And I asked them, well, how come you left your oak tree? Well, everybody had an oak tree here, but we took them out and they put in palms instead. So I took some pictures of some of the houses along the street there. And you see no palms. I went in the backyard of one of them and took this picture of a pond in the back. And you see all the algae that's going around to the right and all the algae going around to the left. And there's really no trees, just grass. And another thing that I think is a little disturbing, you see how the sod is coming all the way down, almost down to the water. The water level in this pond was a little low, but you can see where the brownness there is actually the water level. I talked to a couple of people there who said the water level is up. I can't understand why it's low because of all the rain we've had, but that was what they told me there was going on. There is a guy here that's trying to put natives in, and this is his backyard. There's non-natives in here, but he's starting to put native plants in here. And this is the lower one is another house in Sebastian that I really liked. I saw this guy. I drive past his house every day, and I said, wow, you're really doing some nice things. And I said, are these going to be natives? And he says, well, I'm hoping to put some in. Now, what you see is not all natives, but he's making a start. He's getting rid of some of his sod, and is making a start to do things. Back to the Collier County, Collier Creek, I went and looked at another pond, and they are making some progress there. You can see they started planting some native plants around pickerelweed and duck potato. And if you look, you can't see it in there, but in one of the algae I saw this anhinga, and it had a fish in its mouth. So I was quite happy about that. So there can be progress. What people are concerned is that we're probably heading for a sixth extinction. The fifth one was when a meteor came down and knocked off all the dinosaurs died. Many scientists believe we're headed for the sixth one, and it's going to be caused by us humans. The 2014, Audubon did a survey of the birds, and they've been collecting Christmas counts for years and years and years. Cornell University has now done a tremendous amount of analysis of this data. And they're showing that in the next 50 years, we're going to lose 314 species are going to go down. Some of them may go extinct. In 2016, another survey was done, including Canada and Mexico, and they found that 432 species out of 1,100 are at risk. We have 1.5 billion fewer breeding birds compared to 40 years ago, and 46 species have lost half their population. So the birds are in real trouble, particularly the migratory birds, because they need to have a good food source at both ends. They depend on Florida. Actually, many of these birds coming through in migratory, we see them in our yards during the spring and fall. They're looking for insects to carry them through to the rest of the way. If you have a normal population, you can tolerate ups and downs. But if you have a population that's in real trouble, if you have a down, that could be the end. And that's kind of what the pink is at the bottom. And we like to talk about, insects can be beautiful. They're very specialized. Native plants have really critical, the insects and the plant interaction is really quite critical. Most insects only eat 1 or 2 or 3 plants. And it's a long evolutionary history that's gone on between plants and animals. You bring in these exotic plants that we're seeing planted in most of our new houses now, that you see hardly any insects. You hardly see any birds, because there's no insects there, and if you don't have insects, you won't have birds. So most of these eat 90% of the insects are plant eaters. They can be beautiful. Monarchs have declined, 94%. These are the families of birds, not species, but families of birds that depend upon insects. Many, many, many. No insects, no baby birds. And of course, if we don't have birds, we don't have our biological diversity. We're kind of partial about birds here. But it's not just birds. It's, we're concerned about the lagoon. We're concerned about our Sebastian River, Blue Cypress Lake, and canals. We have these canals coming down. They're terrible. They got a lot of toxic stuff in them. They're putting all kinds of stuff to take out the weeds. And people depend upon this for food. Our children, we've lost generations that don't want to go outside anymore. Kids are scared to go outside. Their parents don't want them to go outside. So we got to change that and make their yards more environmentally friendly. We can share our neighborhoods with wildlife. We can create corridors connecting natural areas. We can reduce the lawn area, and we can begin a transition from alien ornaments, these would be non-natives, to native ornamentals. You can get some nice-looking natives available. So we're suggesting, what do we get rid of half our grass? Why don't we go a little further and remove 90% of it, like Martin County is thinking about doing? There is hope if we can replace our lawns with native plants. Exotic plants are sort of like putting statues in your yard. They really don't, they're there for somebody to look at and feel, but they don't do anything for wildlife. They don't do anything for our planet. They're just there to look at nicely. But if you put native plants in, it's like having a bunch of bird feeders around there. You can, the birds can be there, and you're doing something good for our planet. So we need innovation solutions. I've listed 3 of them here. I'm kind of running out of time. I'll just go quickly, but we need basic, nice landscapes, and there are some really good people out here that can do landscapes. Protect and enhance and restore our habitats. If you look at the map of Sebastian, we don't have a lot of parks here. The parks you do have in Sebastian are kind of county parks and wildlife areas. Sebastian needs to think about preserving more. And we need to get a balance between decorative value and the food web. And we need that balance. We want yards to look nice, and we can do that with natives too. So we can make our bringing nature home, we could have suburban national parks. Every home have a park, and we can have these residential parks. We can put the stuff between our roadways can be put into nice flowers and plants with natives. So our landscapes must support nature, humans, and wildlife, reduce pollution, sequester carbon, and clean and manage water and support pollinators. What we want to do is revise, then, as I mentioned before, revise the ordinances in the cities and the counties. And we got another project coming called Plant 100,000 Trees in Our County. And I'll get back in just one more slide after that. But what we're proposing to do, and I've got copies of a document that you might want to use if you're making your recommendations as suggested, is have only 10% grass, the rest in natives. We don't need that lawn stuff out there. That's kind of coming over from the British, and it doesn't do anything for nature. We like to have every yard have 5 diverse trees and 4 of them native. And 75 to 90% of the plants on the yard would be native, no invasive plants. 10-foot buffer around these ponds so that they get absorbed, the fertilizer and the chemicals, and that should not be too hard. We don't need to require sprinklers in yards. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. And we kind of like to have permeable surfaces too, so that the water can go into the time. At our Audubon house, the county wouldn't let us put in permeable parking lot. I can't. They just don't work. Well, they do work, and we got to enforce our fertilizer ordinances too. So we were working together on 100,000 trees in Indian River County. Got the Ocean Research and Conservation, or ORCA group, together. The Indian River Land Trust is on board. The Environmental Learning Center is supporting us. The Indian River Health Department wants more trees. People are healthier with trees. And it cleans out, gets rid of the CO2 and a bunch of other things. Of course, Audubon, and we're hoping funding from NEP on this project. So there are ways of getting, this is a slide, it's kind of outdated, but there are ways that you put in your zip code or you can get a list of plants. The Native Plant Society has a nice list, not based on zip code, but based on county. It's a good list. You know, probably the best one right out now is, and I don't have it on this slide, is Institute for Regional Conservation has a zip code. So you can get on that website, put your zip code in, they can tell you the plants that you should have in your particular area. Let's collaborate, more minds working together, the more we can accomplish for the betterment of our community and our world. Let's transform our county. Sebastian could lead the way and be the example, and thanks. Let's all work together. I have copies of Dr. Grant Gilmore. They took a copy of, this is a copy of the
Thank you.
Sebastian Landscape Ordinance, and then next to it, on the right-hand side of the column.
If you don't mind, they can't hear you for the, yeah, Thank you, sir.
On the right-hand side of the column that I gave you is the model ordinance put out by the Florida Native Plant Society. It was actually written by a professor in the University of Florida, and gave this to the Plant Society. If you can get online and get a copy of that, I've got a flyer back here I haven't given you yet. I can distribute to that, how you can get on to see the actual document to that thing. I had hoped to give you this 10 days ago, but you didn't get it. So it's going to take you some time to go through it. It's 60 pages long, unfortunately, but most of that is because of your ordinance is so long. And that's on the left side. And so the changes are not so much on the right-hand side, which is the Native Plant Society is suggesting. Now, the problem will be integrating these together into one document and show the differences between the existing and the future. And I don't know if we want to work together or how you'd want to do that, but something to consider.
Dr. Baker, I just wanted to add, the Florida Native Plant Society Model Landscaping Ordinance was included in their agenda packet for the last meeting, so they've all had it for review.
Good, then you already have that.
Yeah, it looks, yeah.
But this is taking that and just composing it.
Side by side.
And Dr. Graham Cox on our board put this together for us. It took him a long time, a lot of effort, but he's tried to make the different aspects correlate to one another so that you can see where one is. It makes some suggestions on the other side. So that should help you out a lot.
Yeah. I wish I had this earlier.
Pardon?
I was doing a lot of page flipping over the last few weeks. So but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Not at this time. Okay. And I think now we have Ms. Monroe, if you're ready to come up and present your information as well. Thank you very much for coming.
Hi, speaking of being ready, I am so underdressed for this party. Oh my God. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I completely misunderstood it, and on top of that, today was Loud Shirt Day with my girls group, and so I am, yes.
We appreciate you being here. No worries.
Thank you all for the invitation. So when I got the email to come and give you all 10 minutes of our Florida-friendly informational talk, it was give a brief overview of Florida-friendly, how it applies in our county, and also a few tips on how to manage lawns. So that is what I'm going to get into with you all now. All right, so Florida-friendly landscaping is basically best management practices compacted into something that homeowners can unpack and use. Very practical tips, very reasonable things that any and everyone who wants to do anything in their landscape can go ahead and accomplish. So we have goals. I want to explain to you all why it is important for water quantity and water quality, and then I'll give you a few things about turf grass management so that people can keep their yards beautiful, the grass can be healthy, and it can be accomplished in a low-maintenance fashion. So Florida-friendly landscaping, it is an integrated approach to maintaining an attractive, colorful, and diverse yard. It is absolutely friendly to wildlife, even though I don't mention that principle as one of the things to do with your lawn for lawn care. And it should be less work than a traditional landscape. And if you look at the picture in my slide here, this is actually an example of a Florida-friendly landscape. It has 25% less lawn coverage overall, and all they did was expand their beds by 3 feet. That's all they did. And it added color, it added curb appeal to the front of that house. So the goals, we want to create a beautiful landscape. We want people to maintain their property values because, of course, we are state and county funded. Ha ha. you're going to pay your taxes on your property value. So of course we want to encourage you to maintain your property value. I don't ever want to tell anyone, I don't care how your yard looks, because they're going to walk away from my conversation, and they should. I'm supposed to care about how your yard looks. I'm supposed to also give you really reasonable tips on how to keep your yard beautiful, because that is your goal, and I want you to accomplish that goal. So we also want to conserve water, because everybody wants water to drink and do whatever they're doing with water. And of course, we want to protect water quality overall for everyone, including those beautiful birds on the lagoon way up in New Smyrna Beach. So why is Florida-friendly landscaping important? We had 138,000 people in this county in 2010 during the census. That's how many we registered. As at 2017, we've gone to 154,000 plus, and we are steadily climbing. That is 11.8% increase. Indian River County is one of the faster growing counties in Florida. Florida overall is growing by 2% annually if we discount environmental issues elsewhere that drive bodies into this state as it is. And so in our county, as at 2017, we have 80,000 housing units. That means 80,000 spaces where human beings are living, where we have impermeable surfaces for the roof, because we want people to be outside of the rain, and we have flattened surfaces for us to be able to drive and mobilize efficiently. We have to mitigate that by how we manage our landscape. The water originally went down into the soil and percolated back into the aquifer on its own. We've changed the way that that water is flowing. We've changed the way that that water is going. It's going sideways and then down instead of going down and then sideways. When it went down and sideways, it had an opportunity to get filtered. It had an opportunity to be softened, to soften the blow on the landscape so that you had less soil erosion. Population growth has absolutely impacted our limited water resources. We are surrounded by water, but there's only so much of it that we can use for the purposes that we want to use it for. That's important when we talk to people, because as long as we're turning on our faucets, they believe we do not have a water crisis. But screaming and shouting, we have a water problem, we have a water problem, is also not enough. We have got to sit down and think rationally through the solutions. And the solutions are not going too far in one direction or dragging everybody too far in the other direction. It is meeting in the middle and saying, I've got an answer for your beautiful yard and your water problem. Water quantity is affected because we're increasing the demand for water, right? We have unsustainable landscape designs, and that is compounded by what we have already been doing with agriculture. Agriculture is on a very short leash. We cannot continue to ring that bell. Ag is being heavily monitored. So now it is on us, who are taking up more of that agricultural space for residential areas, to also go ahead and say, you know what? I can do my part. I can save water right here in my home landscape. Water quality is also being impacted because we have increased pollution and we have decreased habitats that filter the polluted runoff before it enters into the aquifer. That is what we as homeowners and people who are managing smaller spaces can definitely do well, even if 10 people on our block are not doing it. One thing that I've noticed is that when people see that something is working and they realize that you are spending so much more time on your front porch and not making that much of an effort in your yard, they want to do what you're doing. So let's talk about turfgrass management as it directly applies to how it can fit into the Florida-friendly landscaping principles. So we have right plant, right place. That is the linchpin of Florida-friendly landscaping practices. As long as you put down the right plant in the right place, all the other 8 practices, I've only got 6 listed here, will definitely become very easy to follow. Simply because when you put the right plant in the right place, you're not going to be overwatering. You're not going to be over-fertilizing. You're not going to be fighting with pests. If it is a pest-prone plant and you do not want to be fighting with it, that's the wrong plant for you. So you're putting the right plant in the right place. If it prefers full sun and you've got it to the north side of your house, that's the right plant in the wrong place. All right? Watering efficiently. That is the major cause of distress among so many homeowners when they come in with a wilted, awful-looking piece of plant material. We have to look at them and say, where is it? How often is it getting watered? And we're squeezing goo out of these plants. And it's quite honestly usually because they've got their irrigation system set way over what the plant actually needs to be able to function efficiently. We think that we are doing the plant a favor, and we are not. All right, fertilizing appropriately. We won't ever say to anyone, never, ever, ever, ever fertilize anything at all, because truly some things need a wee bit of help, but sometimes we do give it way more than it really, really needs assistance with. Recycling is major. Our lined landfills are not supposed to get any vegetation in it at all anyway. It is easier and it is more efficient to recycle your own home waste instead of coming to me and telling me, oh, there is no soil in Florida. Of course we have soil in Florida. You're just not used to our soil in Florida. It has high mineral content and very low nutrient content. That is the nature of the beast. And recycling your yard waste is a completely easy way to manage how you amend your soil at home. Reducing stormwater runoff, having a healthy stand of turf is a major component of reducing stormwater runoff if that's what you intend to do in your yard. And protecting the waterfront, same thing. So right plant, right place, select the correct cultivar based on growing conditions. What is the purpose of that turf? Are you just going to sit down and look at it grow and mow it every Saturday morning and disturb your neighbors at 5:30? Or are your children going to be playing ball on it? Are your cats and dogs going to be using it as their outdoor restroom area? What is the purpose of that grass? Knowing the purpose of that grass is going to be is one of the components in selecting the right type of grass to put into that area. And then what are the maintenance requirements? The right grass in your yard is going to require that you have minimal amounts of water being used, minimal amounts of fertilizer, and you're going to have to assist it with pesticides a lot less than if you had chosen the wrong cultivar and it is constantly failing to thrive and you are constantly fighting with it to do what you want it to do where it's not supposed to be. Water efficiently. Most cultivars only require 1 inch a week. And when we have our water management system say we're on a drought situation and you're only allowed to water twice a week, then by all means, make sure that you're putting down 1/2 inch each day that you're allowed to water so that your grass will get that 1 inch of water that it needs every week. And that might seem to be the biggest thing, but actually, mowing height. When people allow their grass to live where it is most comfortable living, then they will have grass that is more robust, it is more resilient to drought situations and conditions, and it can devote more of its energies towards doing what you need it to do to become more drought resistant, which is send down more fibrous roots. We have puny root systems on lots and lots of cultivars of grass that are promoted as drought tolerant simply because people are not mowing them at the correct height. Your basic St. Augustine grass can be mowed and maintained at 4 to 5 inches, and it will adore you. It will adore you. But we even have some places where there are rules and regulations that say you're not allowed to grow your grass that high. And yet they put in that cultivar, and they proceed to argue and fight with the poor thing. That's not smart behavior. That is not managing your investment in having a green lawn. And of course, you've got to water it early in the morning. Watering overnight is not brilliant behavior here in Florida because we have the perfect place for fungi to thrive. It is hot, it is humid, and all that fungus needs is the opportunity to sit overnight on your grass, and it will go ahead and overtake and infest it. You cannot believe the amount of large patch I've had to diagnose in people's lawns and explain to them, this is what you've got to do to remedy this, and this is how you do it. And they look at me as if I've lost my mind when I tell them, please water early in the morning. Sometime between this time and that time is the appropriate time where your leaves are not sitting down in the dark, super wet for very long periods of time, and neither are you burning it out in the brightest part of the day in the sunlight. There is a sweet spot. Fertilizing appropriately. I've asked people, how much lawn are you fertilizing? And they look at me and they're like, why? And I say, well, we need to figure out how much fertilizer you need to be putting down. There's a specific amount that you would be putting down if your lawn is looking unhealthy and it needs a boost. So we should have soil tested for pH and nutrients. Sometimes it is a matter that that cultivar of grass does not do well in that soil with that pH. They imported the wrong kind of grass, and therefore it's not going to do well. We have salt air, and that directly affects the soil pH. It makes us more in the alkaline range than the acid range. Calculate the area that needs to be fertilized so that people will put out as much as they went and bought because they think that they have to. They don't want to waste their money, so they over-fertilize their yards. Use according to the plant needs. We are looking at grass that we've had growing in plain old Florida soil, and all we did was mow it and leave the clippings on it for 2.5 years. And we've not fertilized it, and it has been just fine. You do not have to feed grass if it is doing well already. And avoid weed and feed products. Because if you are weeding that spot, you should not be feeding that spot. And if you are feeding that spot, surely there's no weed there for you to kill. So whatever is left unused is going to get washed away in our sugar sand soil, and it's just going down and sideways. Over-fertilizing, big deal. That is the biggest problem that we've got with people going out there and putting everything and anything on their yards. It stimulates excessive growth of algae and the plant that you're maintaining. I have not ever seen people so in dire need of exercise as the people who make that kind of work for themselves. They go out there, they overfeed their grass. Then it grows 2 inches overnight, and they're out there fighting with it again, chopping it all off. The grass is a little confused, just like I am generally when I have people who come in and they tell me what their regimen is. I fed it this week, I mowed it to death the next week. Okay. And what doesn't stay into the lawn, because you have not allowed it to grow robust roots and it's not holding anything right there in the yard, is being washed over into our water bodies, and it is contributing to the algal blooms. It aggravates pest problems because most pests prefer succulent, tender, new growth. As long as they can get on the really easy tissue to eat up and to press themselves into, they're not going to fight with the hardier parts of that plant. It also requires that we frequently water the grass, because if we over-fertilize, we've got to overwater it. The grass can't do anything, it'll start to burn out if we don't. And of course, these things, whenever the water does go downward, it seeps into the aquifer. And I've got to always caution people, please read the label on anything that you are using, because the label is actually a law. Lots of people are like, it's not a county or a city or even a state law. These are federal laws, so they must be adhered to. Recycling. Leave grass clippings on the lawn. Return those nutrients to where they came from, and keep them out of nearby water bodies. Saw a Facebook post about 3 days ago where a man had road rash. simply because he was riding his motorbike and skid out on a huge area where there was nothing but grass clippings on the road. It's really, really, it was ugly. But it also drives home the fact that grass clippings do not belong on our asphalt roadways. It does not belong on our sidewalks where children play and can run and jump and skip and slide. It belongs back on the grass where it can do the most help and not being funneled down into the drains where it can end up into our lagoons. Everything runs sideways. Reduce stormwater runoff. Stormwater runoff is actually excess water from irrigation, rain, and other sources. It's not just when we have a storm event. It's whatever water is running off of your landscape. The goal with Florida-friendly landscaping is to keep the water in your landscape, make it go downward, not straight sideways. We want to slow down the water's flow towards the lagoon. And this is one of the greatest threats to water quality in Florida. I missed a slide. So I had a slide, I think I accidentally deleted it, where I had the downspouts running towards grass that was about 4 inches high. And it actually had water, and the water would be slowed down because it is hitting into grass. Water is going to take the path of least resistance. And if you are growing grass, if you're putting in 18 plant beds, whatever it is that you're doing, putting in rain gardens, as long as you can keep that water onto your landscape and out of the storm drains and out of the swales and out of the canals as fast as it can go, then you are making an impact on recharging the aquifer. And the water will have an opportunity to get cleaned, to get scrubbed the way that it's supposed to before it eventually goes sideways. Protecting the waterfront. We all live on the waterfront in Florida. It does not matter if you can see the Sebastian River, the inlet, the lagoon, the Atlantic Ocean from your front window. If you live near a retention pond, if you've got a swale, if there are canals behind your house, if you're literally on Riverside or Oceanside, you are on the waterfront. Everything that you do is going to affect the larger bodies of water here in Florida, be it the ones that our homes are over or the ones that we play and have other activities in. Establishing a 10 to 20 foot buffer zone between landscape and shoreline is major, all right? It helps to protect the waterfront from runoff. I like when Richard had his slide up there that said, you know, the grass clippings are going everywhere and it was right there up against the retention pond. This is beautiful. It's not ugly. It's very accentuating. It makes you want to sit there and have your morning coffee and look out. And what this also does is it gives a place for wildlife to come and be safe. You do not have to mow it and make all of the grass clippings go straight into the water either. This would be a beautiful addition to many, many retention ponds. I mean, if you've got to put it in there anyway, might as well make it be something attractive and nice for people to see. So planting a border of low-maintenance plants between the lawn and the shoreline or the seawall, it also helps to absorb nutrients. So, for example, someone forgets to put on their deflector shield if they're putting out fertilizer. This is going to catch it because that's a 10 to 20 foot buffer zone, okay? It's going to provide habitat for wildlife, and it is going to reduce the amount of erosion that you experience in those spaces. Because if you do not put something like Richard's picture with where the retention pond had a little bit of soil showing, all of that is going to get beaten up by the rainwater. That is not low impact. That is being impacted. And the grass is not filling that in fast enough because that type of grass it does not live that way. It is not going to say, oh, look, new territory, let me go expand my horizons. That is not the type of grass that is there. But these plants, if we purposefully and mindfully put other plants in there, they're going to remain there whether or not the water is high or low. And this is another example of a Florida-friendly home with 25% more of the landscape cut out away from the grass. This is going to save that homeowner time, money, and effort, and of course, it adds to curb appeal. You've got the traditional appearance that people place a lot of value on, but it also gives them less area that they've got to mow and blow, less area that they think they're going to have to put maximum inputs in. And of course, if you all have any questions, if you'd like to find out more about any of these tips, please contact an Indian River County Master Gardener. They are the very best Florida Master Gardeners, and they like tackling these kinds of issues. Do you all have any questions?
Not at this time.
I'm okay in
Very
the hot
complete.
seat, you know.
Oh, it's not a hot seat.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
I started working here 11th January 2016, and I graduated with my degree in plant science with a horticulture concentration December 11th, 2015. Yes.
Time goes by fast.
It does, and you know what? It's a wonderful experience when you're doing what you love. Yes, I work with a really great group of volunteers and people who staff the Extension office.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
We're making recommendations as we go forward. With everything that you've said to us, if we were to make one recommendation, what would that be, in your opinion, if you only had to do one?
Identify your grass, mow it to the highest mowing height. And here's one thing. I've had a lot of people look at me during my talks and say, I don't cut my own grass. And I look at them and I say, but you cut something else, a check. Your mow and blow people cannot hold you captive. You pay them for their services. You contracted with them for a specific service. They have the obligation to either be able to fulfill that the way that you want it done, or they can allow you to take your business to someone else who will.
So what you're saying is you'd like to see a grass height recommendation maybe included in there?
Absolutely. Because if you're mowing your grass to the correct height, then it's going to be more drought tolerant. It is going to be more tolerant of pest issues. St. Augustine Floratam is supposed to be really, really good with chinch bugs, but that's only if you're doing it the way it's supposed to be done. We can't be murdering it at 2.5 inches when its optimum height is 4 to 5 to 6 inches.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Okay, so I'd like to move to a discussion, if we can, as to how we want to move forward, if there are questions that maybe we can kind of field with the staff to clear up any questions we might have on what we've read, et cetera, if that's okay.
Yeah, we need to have a bulleted list as a team of suggestions that we feel are highest priority. So maybe start with some items that are the highest priority to you personally.
Can we do it as a workshop and then get it to you? Or would you like something tonight, or?
I think we just do it here. I
Do
think
it
that's what
here?
we're here for.
Okay.
Am I assuming correctly? Okay. I think one of the things that I noticed with the existing Sebastian landscaping ordinance was we do have indications of which species are undesirable exotics, which species are suitable trees. To me, when I was reading through them, it seemed like there was minimal emphasis on, yes, these trees, there are 7 trees listed that are natives that can be used, but in terms of emphasizing natives overall, I don't know if we could insert something at the very beginning saying that one of our goals for the city, and this is speaking for myself, and I'll open this up to the others as well, is that the natives are something that we should try and protect, the native vegetation that exists before it is cleared for development, or if we can bring back whatever native vegetation is possible with redevelopment or with modifying an existing property. I think, I don't know, I do think that Sebastian should try to emphasize that as a city. We have very unique kind of vegetation and biodiversity here, and I think that's something we should try and highlight. Two places where I thought maybe we could do that is at the very beginning, at the kind of applicability. It seems to me, well, sorry, I feel like I'm going in many different directions, but maybe right after that, trying to put something in here as to what the goals are for public and private property, trying to preserve the native vegetation. And there was also a section, section 54-3-14.8. It's a paragraph on residential landscaping requirements. It basically is a paragraph that says, you know, all areas of lots not covered by a building or impervious surface shall be grassed, sodded, seeded, or fully covered with landscape rocks. And it really doesn't mention until the very end something about xeriscaping. There was nothing about native vegetation or trying to maintain any areas of native vegetation, and I thought that should really be included. So that would be my kind of initial, that was probably the most important thing to me. I'll open it up to any of you.
Well, I think, you know, you have to look at something, I don't know what the code for the river or waterfront areas.
The push button. There you go.
A code for waterfront areas where she mentioned the native species doing the 10 to 15 foot. Yes. I mean, I think that would be an ideal thing. We are on the river here, and you know, when you see grass going right up to the river, you're gonna know you're gonna get some drain off there from your stuff. So I think that would be something that we want to look at.
Is that an area that would be feasible for us to put some kind of a minimum percent?
Recommendation for waterfronts, 10 to 20 foot worth of a band of native plants. I think we should do that. I think we should.
I mean, I'm not here to say what is feasible or isn't,
Right.
but we're just fielding your concerns. It's definitely something I think is certainly approachable, of course.
Can we make a bullet point about the grass height as well? Because the code enforcement officer here goes and makes you mow it short. Maybe not so short like some people do, but it has to be mowed short. And some of the homeowners associations, they really do force you to cut it real short. And at 3 to 4 inches, when you see a St. Augustine lawn at 3 to 4, even 5 inches, you're going to think it's kind of fuzzy. And they'll want to cut it, but it really does look good when it is longer. Another thing I was wondering about, most of this refers to new home development, and there is a lot of that going on, but Sebastian is also pretty much pre-developed except for the outlying areas where the newer subdivisions are coming in, and some of these subdivisions are even outside of our municipality. It may not have an effect on them. And I was wondering, is there some way, because it's tied directly to the community, if we could recommend that the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Act, be opened for houses that have an existing lawn problem or an invasive species problem? It may be somebody who doesn't have the money to redevelop that lot or property, like how we do the signages or other things with CRA. The homeowners don't really have access to it except for in certain circumstances. But I was wondering if there was any way an avenue could be opened up for a homeowner to apply for a grant, or maybe even perhaps an incentive through some ad valorem line item in the property taxes if you do this. Whatever we can affect on our end as Sebastian, because a lot of those property taxes, again, are stipulated that they go towards schools, police, and you can't mess with them. But there's some places we may be able to incentivize or at least open up a door for a grant or some other type of relief for people who may have spent a lot of money on this landscape and now regrets that decision, but may not be in a position to dig it all up and go with a xeriscape or some other type of project like that, because it does cost a lot of money to dig up your.
As the CRA director.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up.
Let me feel that one for you. As you may or may not know, the CRA is just the riverfront area plus the triangle. So it only goes from the river to the railroad tracks, right, in the city of Sebastian. And so it doesn't include a lot of single-family homes, which I think you're referring to, trying to get some relief and some assistance. But on that same note, the CRA does offer a facade landscape and signage grant to people within the CRA if they want to upgrade any of those things on their property, either their facade, their signs, or their landscaping. We offer grant dollars for them to be able to do that within the CRA. The thing is with the CRA, the dollars that are generated there have to be spent there, and that's by Florida statute. So we can't offer it in other areas of like the Highlands or anything like that of the city. But I like the idea of trying to provide incentives for existing homes to possibly upgrade their landscaping and try to create more of a green infrastructure, if you will, and connected systems, because that's what becomes very important, is that, just because your lawn is full of natives, but your neighbor's lawn is vacant and, being pesticided every day, it may not work very well, let me just say that. But we're going to look into that. There's CDBG dollars that we'll be going after next year, and we're right now trying to determine how we'd like those dollars to be spent to the best use of this community. But, that's next year. That's not, next year being 2019, 2020 budget. So, but we'll look at other ways to try to incentivize that.
But the people in the CRA, the triangle, that goes out 512, doesn't it?
That's correct, but it's only the triangle area.
Right.
Once it kind of ends, you're done.
A lot of people see it, though, as they're driving by down the US 1 corridor, and it's directly riverfront as well. It may be a small portion. It's just something I thought about.
And we do offer that incentive, and we'd love to provide it to more people to do more of that landscaping, native landscaping, absolutely.
So what is the interaction between our landscape companies and our developers and us, per se, in terms of what we're trying to do here? And is this message being conveyed to developers? Obviously, they have to comply with the St. Lucie County requirements, but what type of buy-in have we gotten from the business community that, these guys are the construction people?
Well, and again, because I'm a little bit more familiar with the landscape code and the development process, I'll just field this one. But, when a developer comes in to develop a piece of property, they have to meet all of our regulations. And so, of course, they may hire a landscape architect or a landscape firm to make sure they comply by our regulations. And our regulations, as you've surmised, do support native landscaping. I think what we're hearing is that we could do better. And so that's certainly something that we'll take into consideration as we upgrade the landscape ordinance. But I'm not sure I understand the rest of your question,
Brian. Here's what
Brian.
I'm thinking is, I moved here 4 years ago, and I spent a ton of money on St. Augustine grass. I wish I hadn't done now, and I'm thinking to myself, well, how do we prevent this? People from like myself moving in, and they're like, well, I'm gonna clear this, and I'm gonna put in all this grass, and realizing now that, whoops, that was really kind of a silly idea in terms of, the ecology of it. So when,
There's mentioned in the ordinance that there should be a homeowner's packet, and I actually was interested in that. I tried looking for it.
I didn't get one.
Well, no, and I think maybe for new homes, if there's a certificate of occupancy that needs to be issued, maybe there is one, but
There is. I deal with it every day. If you'd ask me, I have it. It's actually, if you, just inside City Hall, there's the application for tree removal, and there's this homeowner packets right there. It's the tree calculation basically simplified into a
for the lot
homeowner's
and how many
packet.
trees you need per lot. Now, and I don't know if there's any way we can make that, now I know this isn't part of the ordinance, but one big part of this is education and getting buy-in from nurseries and landscapers and the developers. But I think that homeowners play a really crucial role in making the decision. Is there any way that we can put that out to, title companies when even a house changes hands?
Or maybe even we do some kind of PR promotion when we get this new ordinance done, where we get this information out into the business community and landscapers, developers, that sort of thing, and also encourage the awareness of it, because I think that's the main, if people don't know about it, like, I just go back to what I did, and I'm like, wow, that was really lame.
Yeah. Okay.
A million years ago, Marine Resources Council had an Eco Neighborhoods program that I was involved in when I was in my master's program at FIT, but I don't know if they still have that or not, but it was something like that, where you put together a whole big booklet of native species and Florida-friendly yards and all of that really great information, and gave it to homeowners. And now it was supposed to be, like a ringleader in your block or your neighborhood that would then, educate people. I don't know if they have that program anymore, but I like the idea of maybe we have a homeowner's packet that maybe includes a little bit more information than, and we certainly have the website.
I like the idea of meeting the tree code before property changes hands as well.
Yeah, with the tree code, one of the things that it's been a pet peeve of mine ever since I've moved down here. I've noticed that they would put in the oaks that were required. They would put in these nice native trees, and then you would see by their, the edge of their driveway, once they got their certificate of occupancy, those trees were out of the ground. And I don't know, I know that this is man hours and labor, but some way that you can ensure maybe 6 months, a year later, if anyone can go out and check to see that those trees are still there, because that really is the goal, that you want those trees to be established and then not be removed.
Of course, that's a problem when again, it's about right plant, right place. They put the wrong tree in the wrong place. Young magnolia needs a lot of water, and they're putting it in a high area, and they don't have irrigation. They're just going to die. And we're dealing with that on a commercial property, right? But so we do follow through, but it usually is dealing with our larger commercial. But they're required to have them for the next 30 days. The developers are required to replace them. So
within 30 days. Okay. Within the residential landscaping requirements, I thought that might be a great place to try and put in some kind of a percentage as to how much of the lawn can be grassed, as opposed to kind of landscaped with native vegetation. I think 50 is kind of the basic minimum, and I wanted to throw it out to the rest of you guys in terms of, again, I know this is goals and ideals that we're writing down here, but I don't know. I think the more native vegetation, the better, and encouraging people to see the benefits and see the benefits to them, to their water usage, to the biodiversity. Is there, go ahead, I'll open it up. Any ideas from you guys?
I think if we could get 50%, that would be ideal. Compared to most of the houses in the neighborhoods, you look at them, very little gardens whatsoever, and try to shoot for like 90% native. It's like said earlier, if you just stretch out the flower beds you have now and keep growing them out more. When we moved in our house, it was about 18 inches, 2 feet away from the house, and now I at least have it like 6 feet away from the house. So I don't know what that was. When I went to the seminar that Dr. Baker and his group from the Audubon Society put on, Dr. Edie, I said too quick, Witter, had this great thing about the rain gardens. And with all the construction going on right now, I think it would really be neat if we could get them to put the rain gardens in. They already have backhoes on the property, and as they're doing the landscaping, before they lay the sod, if they could do the perimeter of the property in the rain garden to catch all the water runoff from the rains we have to catch their own fertilizers and things, that would be helpful to our problem with the lagoon.
I like the idea of 50%, 90% natives. I think that that's a great idea. Anything you guys?
Well, I mean, this is only new construction, right? This only applies to new construction?
I think it also applies if you've done renovations up to 50% of the total land area. So if you go digging up for a new driveway, I bet you this comes into play, as well as if you've done a larger addition.
That's what I wasn't, yeah, so under applicability it says, all new construction as well as development activity otherwise requiring updated code compliance. That for me was vague because I don't know what the code is, but do either of you know?
Yes, and you're absolutely correct. It would only be triggered by a site plan permit. So if they were coming in for a major addition or, reconstruction of their property or their building or a new building, then they'd have to come up to the code compliance, and that includes landscaping. And I'll give you for instance, Walmart wants to add certain things within their existing development, and we've stated, well, you have to come up to your code compliance, including the landscaping, which was put in years and years ago. And so we're requesting that they freshen it up and bring it back up to code compliance before we issue approval for any additions. So yes, that's the only time this would be triggered, and I'm not sure that we can get around that except by educating folks. And I like that idea, and we know that that's a big nugget, but of course that's man hours and time. But we do have social media, we do have website, and we could certainly share things with new homeowner packages and do our very best in that manner. I mean, it's not, that information for Florida Friendly isn't too far away from any of us, so.
Is it, Dr. Baker?
You asked the question about the tree, the one tree that people put in, and I think they're required to put in at least one tree. You have to have at least one tree per yard. I mean, if they don't, then it's pretty ridiculous.
Well, Dr. Baker, it's a calculation. It's based on how many trees they retained and the DBH, diameter breast height of the trees they retain. If there were no trees on the site to start with, then it would be 7 for a quarter acre, for an example.
But when I gave you the example of Collier Creek, you go down that new street, they put in an oak tree in front of their yard. They've taken them out. Should that be enforced after 2 years, since you go back and take a look and see? There's only one oak tree in that whole street, and the guy's leaving it. But he said everybody here had an oak tree, but they're putting in
when they apply
native palm.
When they apply for a tree removal permit, then I go to the site and I see how they meet tree code. So if you apply for a tree removal, you're required to meet the tree code as as a
Putting in
condition
these-
of that. But when they apply for a neighborhood like that, they also have to meet their own neighborhood's requirement, which is usually more than ours, so.
But I would think we would require at least one native tree per lot, or per house in a new construction. And it should be there, I mean, you have to put in usually 4 inch. The requirement, 2 to 4 inch. And you would think that after 2 years, you'd see that tree. It didn't just die because it was in the wrong tree planted at the wrong place. I mean, an oak tree is pretty powerful.
All of our recommended species are native hardwoods.
That was one thing, and, you know, I do think with the trees and the recommendations there, we have that you should have 5 trees for at least a 10,000 square foot lot. And those trees should consist of the native tree species on the list. There's also credits for, I saw sable palms and fruit trees that you can be given permission for. So, you know, I think that we're trying to do that. But in terms of coverage of other types of plants, in terms of native shrubs, native flowers, native vines, those are, and I guess it comes down to enforcement. It's difficult to do. But if this is new construction, even for residences, they should be able to say 50% of our lawn is habitat and not grass, yes? Hypothetically?
Well, we're talking about a lot of houses, residential. We do have standards for that on landscaping on a commercial level for larger properties.
And for residential, what, the code enforcement division is the person who would go out and actually take a look at the property, is that correct?
In what way?
Or do they count the trees? I mean, how does this work exactly?
That's
You
my
count-
job.
Kim
you
does.
I'm the tree counter.
Okay, okay.
And that's when there's new development or updates. So that's not on a
Correct.
regular, you can't call out your neighbor for not having 5 trees on their property. Yeah, okay.
That will be,
So that would be where the motivation would come in and the education.
Right, right. I mean, it's possible to even do a seminar for
Yeah, I'm thinking workshop
the
or
city,
something,
you know,
yeah.
there's, you know, have people who are interested in this sort of thing, you know, act as a resource for them, to initiate some of these changes.
Yeah, I think maybe once the ordinance, and I don't know if that's our responsibility or how we would do that, but some kind of a workshop where there's public education, people who want to be aware of this, can be made aware.
for a lot of homeowners also, because I hear it every day, is it's not always an issue of planting a tree. That's not that's a simple part, is that trees are kind of expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes? I mean, I believe at this point, yeah. I would just ask that you come up, and if you could state your name, maybe we need to have that for the record.
I do not live in Sebastian, but I've done a lot of work on the lagoon. Orcutt. So a couple of things I would like to suggest is there's a state law that says Florida-friendly landscaping has to be allowed. And so that should be included in your ordinance. So in other words, if a subdivision is making you cut your grass too short, that's in violation of the state law. So, you know, that should be part of your ordinance, that Florida-friendly landscaping is allowed. Just like if you want to put solar panels on your roof, it doesn't matter what your homeowners association says, you can put solar panels on your roof. And if you want to hang your laundry on a line, it doesn't matter what your homeowners association said, the state law overrides that. So you should probably pull those up and look at them as you're redoing your ordinances. And you also have a fertilizer ordinance, and nobody's really talked about that. But that should be part of it too, because that's so important for our waterways. And I think the city should set the model. What do we see out here? You know, I just see a lot of sod. And if the city themselves did this, you know, if you want to have a better landscaping code, show people how it's going to look, make it look beautiful. And then, you know, that will help educate people, because when they come to a city property, they'll see that. Perhaps schools, you know, but at least city properties. So those are just some examples. And then, as far as your setbacks, your sod reduction, and particularly near a water body, it can't just be the lagoon front, because all the water in the entire county goes to the lagoon. So it's got to be around all the lakes and everything. And I don't know what Sebastian's water retention is for new development, but in Indian River County, and I think Sebastian's working on it too, all the municipalities are having to address sea level rise. And we're going to have more and more powerful storms, more and more rain. And I think the previous ordinance in Indian River County was that the initial runoff from a subdivision or a property had to hold, 1 inch of rain for a 10-year storm or something like that. So there's this quantity of water the development is supposed to hold. However, we're going to get a lot more water because now we're getting these 500-year storms and stuff. So we need to probably, if you're going to look at your development regulations, you should look at maybe holding back more water, creating more water retention in part of the development. Just a few ideas.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other input? As we look, one of the things that I was, oh, yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't see you.
My name is Spencer Porteous, Porteous. I live in Indian River County. I just want to go back to what you were saying about the residential landscape codes and compare that to the commercial landscaping codes. It says right in the first sentence of the commercial that landscape areas shall include a combination of the following types of materials: trees, shrubs, annuals, perennials, plants, vines, ground covers. No more than 50% grass shall be used in the landscape area for the commercial. Why not do that? It's very simple. Why not just apply that to the residential?
That's where I was going to go next. And one of the things I think, maybe you guys can convince me otherwise, but for commercial landscaping, I think that there should be very, very minimal grass. On a personal level, I can see, I have 2 young sons, kids playing in the yard, that kind of thing. On a commercial landscaping, I think we could probably do better, have a higher percentage of native vegetation, or at least landscaping, as you had mentioned, yeah.
And then it's a very realistic goal for the less than 50% grass on residential. It's a code in Indian River Shores right now that all of their new landscape development it has to be less than 50%. So it's very doable, and I applaud your guys' efforts.
One of the things, actually, there were 2 things in the Indian River County Code that I saw that I actually thought were really great. There was one with, they had an Appendix A that had a list of species that were recommended for different habitats. I think having something like that that's easily accessible for citizens, commercial or residential, and it broke it down by plant type and habitat type. So I think including something like that would be helpful. And as well as on the opposite side, so for exotic invasives, I saw on Sebastian's current code, and that's very early in the code, it has the 5 different species that are never allowed. But there are far more that are listed either by the, the Exotic Pest Council, I know I'm going to get that wrong, or at the very least, the state of Florida has their noxious weed and invasive plant list, which they update. I think if we can do something like that where it's constantly updated, it's not something we have to maintain, and reference that, I think that would be very useful. And I don't know how we communicate that with nurseries, because I think that's one of the problems. I've seen several of these plants, and they're still being sold at nurseries. Is there any way the ordinance applies to businesses that are selling in this area, no, we can't do anything like that.
We can't really dictate when it's legal to sell it.
Just like fertilizers and the fertilizer ordinance, right? Yeah, they can still sell anything, okay.
But, you know, we can't approach our area nurseries, and I've approached the nurseries that we have in Sebastian about the trees that we need, because the homeowners need them to replace their, people have trouble getting their COs, they can't get the right trees, so I've approached them, I've expanded some of the trees, and they know which ones we'll accept and what size we need, and they're working on getting them in, so I think just having a partnership with them makes a difference.
Oh, good. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I think you're all doing a great job. This is Juanita Baker. I live in Sebastian Springs. And I think I have some kind of vision for you making a great ordinance here to model for everyone. And I have two other things you might want to consider. You know, one of the best things about some of our wonderful cities, like San Francisco and New York City has Central Park, is having more community space. And why not in subdivisions have, for their community space? And one of the things you could insist on would be like a butterfly garden or some kind of native plants that would be open to everybody in the community. I'm not in their community. So that would be interesting. And also I am a bird lover. And one of the other visions I have that would really enhance communities, because I know when you have a large area, and I'm not sure about how big a pond you need for this to happen, but if you have an island in a pond, birds will come and nest on that and be part of that if you have some more native kinds of bushes. So people like that because the cranes can come nest on there and be private. And the reason why islands are so special for birds is that the raccoons and snakes and people can't disturb them. So, but yet the people that live in that community could enjoy the island and all the wildlife. So an island wildlife kind of sanctuary for every pond that's over a certain size would be a wonderful kind of vision for your ordinance. And I think you have some great ideas here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is an island within the ponds, is that something that is necessarily within a landscaping ordinance? I'm not sure. No, I don't know.
I mean, it's a nice idea, but the thing is, you know, when the development comes in, they have to store and treat a certain amount of they have to make sure that their pre and post discharge is the exact same. So in accordance with St. John's, they have to retain at least the 24-hour, 25-year storm. They have to treat a certain volume before it can be discharged. So there's a little bit of area that they have to put a lot of things in. And one of them is their stormwater, whether it's wet retention or dry detention. And so they want to get the most volume out of their lake, if you will, or the retention pond. Putting an island in the middle may not be in their best interest. And so that is under a whole different regulation, a whole nother code, and I'm not sure that that's something we would want to start requiring, if you hear what I'm saying.
Would that go along with kind of the requiring them to hold more water to update with sea level rise and future storms, et cetera?
That may be some requirement that we need to come up with in the future. We're about to embark on our coastal resiliency plan, if you will, that will be addressing sea level rise here in the city of Sebastian. I'm waiting for the grant to get released from NOAA. I just got news again today that they're pushing it, but we have been approved for it, so just waiting. But one of the ideas that I really would like us to embrace, because I did this for so many years in my private consulting, is to give credit for littoral zones along our stormwater ponds. And, you know, in the back of, you know, a lot of people are adjacent, their backyard is adjacent to the stormwater pond. but most of them should have littoral shelves and a littoral edge, and it really encourages, you know, the wildlife that we need. I mean, we were just at the dog park the other day, and the whole lake there is just filled with natives, and there was limpkins. Of course, they were going apple snails, but what are you going to do? At least they were after the snails. But I mean, it's really it's a wonderful thing and an easy thing that we should encourage and require as part of our regulations.
So as part of that percentage for the residential areas, that they could include the littoral zone as part of that kind of native landscaping?
I think that it could be in there, but it'll also, I'm looking at our stormwater management plan to have it in there too. There was something else I was going to say about that, but now it'll come to me.
Well, the maintenance of that would also address, I had a call today about the aquatic weed spraying, and they said, well, I don't want them to spray back there. If I just remove the exotic vegetation and I put some native stuff in, I'm like, sure, then they wouldn't spray because there'd be nothing to spray. So, you know, if you were maintaining your natives, we wouldn't have to. When, you know, that's a great approach.
Let me see. Looking through my notes. Any other comments? Oh, one of the things that I saw was in the Indian River County ordinance that I thought was a positive kind of aspect as well. They had a kind of point system where they were incorporating, you had to get, I think it was up to 30 points, and you were able to get points by a certain percent of the lawn, and going above and beyond, you got even more points for less of lawn being grass, or less of the majority of the plants being native, for having extremely efficient irrigation systems, you know, essentially not requiring irrigation systems for things like the native vegetation areas, because they shouldn't require any extra water. I don't know if that's something we would want to consider for an ordinance for the city, where citizens or the developers are able to choose what aspects of the landscape ordinance kind of apply to them and accumulate those points. Did any of you notice that?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, and then what do the points equate to? Why would you want to accumulate the points? What does it give you in return?
They gave you basically approval of your landscape plan, I believe it was.
It'd be like your final P&Z would rely on you meeting these, just like our tree point system, but it includes all these different landscaping things. So maybe you could have one less tree because you put this littoral zone in, or.
Right.
I gotcha. Okay.
So there's kind of some flexibility there. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. Indian River County, their ordinance is very, very long. Yeah, it was section 926.07 in their ordinance. They have landscape point system and tree preservation credits, where, and this would be commercial, so it's for a landscape plan. I'm assuming, again, I'm assuming that I'm reading this correctly, having, you know, moisture sensing controller on the irrigation system, where they have irrigation systems that indicate how much of the landscaping requires high water usage versus low. Having shrubs, trees that are drought tolerant. I would hope to kind of change that to something that's, you know, native and suitable for the site. Having extra shade or canopy trees, having very little sod or grass areas, and getting credits for, you know, Florida native landscaping. I thought that was an interesting way to approach it. It's more of kind of a buy-in system as opposed to a penalty system. I don't know if there's any comment on that.
It would give them incentive to do one thing or another without taking away from trying to get to your goal of more native species, less grass.
I think that's a good idea. It furthers the goal, it gets the job done, and gives the owners more flexibility, right? The point system?
I would assume so. Dr. Baker, you were instrumental in helping to form the Indian River County ordinance. Is that true? Yes. If I remember, do you find that the point system was useful? Do you find that the point system was useful in trying to encourage commercial landscaping to go in the direction of natives and drought-tolerant species? Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
No.
It's been a while. Let's see.
But Nikki, I think, I'm sorry.
Conservation credits?
Yeah.
If I may, well, I think what you're trying to lead towards is that, and we do this now, is that they can substitute other things out, or they get, you're stating more, you know, if they have this much, they're supposed, for instance, they're supposed to have so much clear canopy for their canopy trees, and if they can't attain that because they don't have that area, then they can cluster a certain amount of trees in order to attain that canopy. So I think that's what you're trying to lead towards. Yeah. And it's always a good idea to give people a little bit more flexibility and variability. But I think that we understand that we want to make our ordinance a lot more native friendly and try to give that initiative for people to protect what they have and not disturb it in the first place, because as we all know, even you can't really replace a habitat. So when you dig it out and replant in natives, that's great over time, but what you've already disturbed the soil and you've already destroyed the habitat. So it's, you know, it's trying to protect what's existing first and then securing the replacement of it. And I think that we have a really good direction. I cannot thank was it the Pelican, Audubon, that was it, for giving us this, but it's Dr. Graham. Yeah, I've met him before. For giving us all this information to go by, and I want to encourage the board to, if you continue to think of ideas or things that you feel are important, please share them with Kim, and we'll get them incorporated. Right. Now, and again, I want to encourage you, because I'm going to have to leave. If you want to put together, you know, some kind of statement and submit that up to the council, I mean, it's always helpful. It's always beneficial, so that they know which direction the NRB board feels that we should be going towards these items, the sustainability, the landscaping, whatever you feel is important. Okay?
Okay. If there's no further discussion on the landscaping ordinance, we'll move forward. We've got item D, our guest speaker schedule. We are hoping to meet on the design and rollout of the Sustainable Business Initiative for the August meeting. Looking at guest speakers, I know I personally have reached out to Miss Sharon Connolly. She works with the Brevard Zoo and also with the Brevard Litter Quitter program, just to see what they have in action up there and see what their successes have been, challenges. She said she was not able to come to the actual meeting, but that I was going to meet with her. Maybe I could kind of present what she conveyed to me.
She can always submit material for the agenda packet as well.
Okay, sounds good. Any other ideas? No? Okay. Okay, moving to number 8, we have member matters.
only had one matter. I had asked a little bit about the disabilities, people with accessible disabilities with the park, and I was just wondering how we moved along any with that, or if you can have any update on that.
Sorry, I missed that.
Just in the last meeting, I had just made a note for people with disabilities and accessibility in Riverview Park, and I was told we were doing a study on widening the sidewalks or doing other things to make the Riverview Park more accessible to people with disabilities. Not just people with disabilities, but just people who just can't get around real easy. Seniors, people who are hurt or temporarily disabled, or people who live with a disability. And I didn't know if any progress had been made on that at all.
Well, at Riverside Park?
Yes. Yeah, they were doing in my notes in the.
We are planning on widening the sidewalks, but that was more to prevent tripping accidents and all, but also for the ease of the event holders, because the sidewalks are pretty uneven and they're creating tripping hazards right now.
Right.
But, so that is still in the budget, and we'll see what happens at the end of this budget cycle.
It's just hard to get from one side to the other and somebody in a wheelchair. Like if you're going north to south in the middle of the park, you have to go all the way around to get to one side or the other. Like I just did, we did the Earth Day Festival, but I also did Shrimp Fest with the Rotary. So I got to see it in action. You have that center part there in the middle where like Teddy Roosevelt spoke, and where we did the activities for the paint rocks and everything. There's only one way to get there, and that's right in front of the fountain. You can't get away from there any other way. You can't go from north to south like with one paved area. You have to go through the sand with a wheelchair, or if you're in a walker or a cane or something like that. And I was just wondering about the progress on that. That's all. And you were already working on it, so.
Okay. All right, we'll move to the items for the next agenda. We have the Sustainable Business Initiative coming up for the next meeting.
What are our goals here for we're supposed to come up with a short list, right, of bullet points for our, before we move on to the other business back here on landscape ordinance. Are we going to come up with a bullet point list of things that?
I assumed, yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay, you got, okay.
And I guess, I guess we should have summarized that, but I'm assuming at this point, if Kim's gonna kind of. Okay, all right, perfect. Okay. All right, so in our packets, we have some material that we can use to help get ready for discussing the Sustainable Business Initiative. And I guess at the next meeting, our goal should be to come up with a bulleted list again of what we like to kind of do moving forward. I think the original idea behind this was try and come up with some kind of not only city and board, but also kind of a community partnership, reaching out to businesses, Chamber of Commerce, people in the community that are able to kind of help out in this initiative. I know the document I had submitted to Kim, which is in here, just has some background information on single-use plastic usage. Some of those numbers are pretty staggering. 1 million plastic bottles purchased each minute, less than a quarter of them being recycled. All the styrofoam and straws that we use, and very little of that is able to be recycled, if at all. So I think being a coastal community, I think this is one way that we can try and kind of move forward. So you have this here. I was hoping, I don't know if it's possible, Kim, to send out this document to everyone as a Word document. When I looked at the PDF of the links that I had put in here, you can't click on them, unfortunately. So if any of you are interested, down at the bottom, I included some local examples. I have the Litter Quitter program there. Surfrider has their Ocean Friendly Restaurant certification program. I know Sarasota County is looking at all businesses and trying to come up with ways that they can encourage sustainability. And you've got Key West kind of signing on with the Green Business Bureau, which is a national effort. So there are these certification systems out there, and I think, you know, it could be a really good thing for the local community too.
Seems like every day on the news is another one, and I feel like, oh, write that down, write that down.
Yeah.
Every day.
It's the trend, and I feel like, you know, one of the things I think is very important is that kind of link between people who are supporting businesses and what the businesses are doing. And so being able to educate people and giving them either, you know, bronze, silver, gold, whatever kind of level certification, that people going into that restaurant or going to that business know what that business is doing.
I think, Sebastian, you know, we are, you know, we're right here on the front lines of all this stuff right here, you know. I mean, the turtles with the straws in their nose and everything, and the eating the plastic bags. It's just really.
And it ends up back in our food chain. We essentially are consuming the plastic and the chemicals
Right.
as we're consuming the fish. So.
You know, Sebastian, as the home of Pelican Island, really, we really need to get this stuff done. These two things, you know, for this board.
So I guess we've got that to look through, and then also you, so Brian, you had submitted the plastic straw, the toolkit. The plastic straws suck.
Yeah.
To encourage people and businesses to use less of those.
Yeah, well, eventually I'd like to see us have a, you know, a single-use plastic ban, you know.
I think one of the things, I don't
think it's inapproachable. I mean, as a, well, like on a waterfront business.
Right. I mean, we have a responsibility to where this coast, and single-use plastic has no business on the river. And you know, I mean, you go down, you know, the tiki bar is all plastic cups. You know, it's like, I mean, it's just crazy. And how many, you know, people between, you know, there and Squid Lips, all that stuff is just like, you know, it needs to be gone. Really has to change.
I wrote one of the companies, well, I just emailed them, that provides for Johns Island Club. All of their to-go stuff is they're recyclable now. And they sent me a whole box to my office of examples of everything that they offer. Great. And the prices are really competitive with what they're paying for styrofoam. They just aren't offered from their major food purveyors.
Right.
They have to contact them separately.
Right.
That's the only thing. So that's a direction we need to work out. Our initiative is making that an easier thing.
Paper straws, you know.
I saw pasta straws. Did better, did better than the paper started to kind of get mushy a little bit. But yeah, no, I think that'll be an interesting discussion. So we can kind of look through existing programs, see if there's something we might be able to try and shoot towards. Now, having to write a letter toward to the city council, is that do we need approval from the city council to kind of have this type of initiative? How does that work?
As a board representing the city, we need to have their support in it. So what we need is a goal, like an established, you know, 2 sentences goal with the program, and the goal isn't. It's not really about money expended. It's about them wanting to be classified as a sustainable business. It's not. Right. So it's really just them supporting our overall goals, and that we understand that we can't make laws affecting businesses at this point. But I think we
can recommend to the board that they do.
Yeah, just a goal and a basic. I think that's something we should really shape on next meeting. Is to before we even do our bulleted list and how exactly we want to roll it out, is just the overall details, like generalizations of the program.
Yeah.
And a goal statement for it, a goal statement.
Okay. Is it worthwhile to try and invite some of the community partners in? Should I talk to anyone in the Chamber of Commerce?
I think they're a great place to start.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'll take care of that. Okay. Unless there's any further discussion? All right. Do I have to?
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Made the motion, he's gonna
I
second.
second it. Yep.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sorry. Meeting is adjourned. Sorry, guys.